Hey everyone, so let's go and walk through your Shape as Element page. But before we do that, let's go and turn on a few extra features that I think you'll find beneficial for not only this project, but future projects to come. So come up here to the top of your InDesign, click on Window, and you want to drop down to Control. And this is going to open up a brand new panel for you that this is basically the exact same thing as your Properties panel. But the nice thing is it gives you a little bit more screen real estate. And it also helps by not having to always constantly come over here to the right and click on a panel just to open up things you can immediately get access to from your control panel up here. But just know that either one do the exact same thing and they both have the same function. So whichever one you want to work with is completely up to you. Close it out. Also come up here to View and drop down to Grids and Guides. And let's make sure that our Snap to Guides and our Smart Guides are turned on. What's nice about these features is that as your elements get close to guides that you have set up, whether that you've manually drawn or your margins, or even to other elements, this helps them to sort of snap to alignment. So as those elements get close to those guides, you're going to kind of see it sort of pull towards it. It's got like a gravity or magnetic pull. But just go ahead and make sure those are turned on for now. Alright, so as you recall from the Getting Started video or from the assignment, this is the page we're going to work with. And this is what we want it to look like when we're finished. Now, in order to achieve this, know that I've also given you inside your student guide all the details for each shape that's mentioned, how to create it, its dimensions, basically where it needs to be located, its color, and everything else. So know that you have all the information you need, but you're more than welcome to watch this video, and I'm going to walk you through every step of the way. All right, so I'm going to pull this over here to the side. Alright, so let's get started. Let's zoom in. I'm going to come over here to my toolbar. I'm going to click on the zoom tool. I'm going to click and drag out where I want it to zoom into up here at the top. Now, we're going to be working with the shape tool. And over here inside your toolbar, you're going to find two different tools that look very similar. If you come down here, right below the pencil, you're going to see a rectangle frame tool. And know that that particular tool, the frame tool, is really used for bringing in things like graphics or vector art from Illustrator. So if you're working in things like Photoshop, you've created an image, or you want to add an image to your document, that's really what that tool is used for. And we're going to get a lot more practice with it in the coming weeks. What I want you to click on is the tool right below it. And this is going to be your Shapes tool. Now, depending on the last shape that you used, it may be a rectangle. Mine, for example, happens to be a circle. But you'll notice right down here in the bottom right corner, there is an arrow. This means that there are additional tools hidden underneath it. And to access those tools, you can basically just right-click on it, and it'll bring up the additional tools underneath. And so if you don't have the rectangle tool already, just go ahead, right-click the Shapes tool, and then click on Rectangle tool. Now, if you're familiar with Photoshop or Illustrator, most of these tools function the exact same way as far as drawing with a shape. All you do is simply click and drag to create a free-formed shape. And you'll notice as I click and drag it, I can make it as tall as I want or as wide as I want. And whenever you let go of the mouse, it creates a shape for you. I'm going to delete that one and do this again. This time, know that if you want to create a shape that is proportional, let's say a perfect square. Whenever you want to draw a shape like that, you click, and as you drag it out, notice right now it's doing freeform, but hold down the Shift key, and notice it constrains it. So the Shift key will always help to constrain your shape to a perfect shape. Perfect square, perfect circle, perfect polygon, etc. And once you've drawn your shape, if you need to scale it, manipulate it, make it wider, make it taller, go over to your selection tool, which is the black arrow, or you can also press V on the keyboard, click on it, and then you've got, whenever you do that, you're going to notice all these additional points that you have access to. And so these are your manipulation points. And so in order to manipulate this, if I wanted to make it wider, if I pull right here on the center pieces, notice if I pull it to the left, it'll expand it to the left. If I come over here to the right, it'll scale it over to the right. Same thing with the up and down. Okay. And so the center ones really constrain it to those particular areas that you're trying to move. It keeps it straight. Now, if you want to manipulate both the width and the height, you can always grab the corner points down here. So click and just drag it out. And finally, one last bit about working with shapes is if you need to rotate it, and we're going to do this here as part of this exercise, just know that whenever you take your selection tool over here to the corner, notice how we get these different icons. So right now, whenever we move it over there, we get that sort of line, that double arrow. That is your scale. But if we move it beyond outside that point, it kind of moves to that sort of arched arrow, and that is basically for rotate. And so once you've done that, you can just click and hold it down, and you can rotate it in the direction that you want. Okay. And just like with anything inside Illustrator or Adobe and InDesign, if you want to constrain those rotations to 45-degree angles, so as you rotate, so I'm going to click and drag to begin rotate. If I hold down the Shift key, it's going to constrain those rotations to 45-degree angles. And you notice as I go around, it's listing the angle for each one. 180, 135, 90, and so forth. Okay? All right, so that's just kind of an overview of how to work with shapes inside InDesign. So for right now, though, if you've already drawn your shape, that's fine. We're going to simply select the outer edges, and we're going to pull them all the way to the edge of the document. And these shapes are pretty much vector-based. They're not bound by resolution. So you can always come back and edit them as needed. So once you've drawn the shape to go from the left edge of the document all the way to the right, let's just make sure that it's the correct size according to our student guide that we have listed. So come over here to your Properties panel, or over here inside your Control panel. Click on it, and we're going to adjust the width and the height. So according to our sheet, our width should be 8.5, which it is, and our height should be 1.75. So to manipulate the height of this, we're simply going to highlight the number inside the height box and type in 1.75 and hit enter. All right, so now next what we want to do is we want to make sure that it's positioned where it needs to be. And whenever we're working with a shape, and tell you what, I'm going to use my control panel for this so we can see the entire shape here. So whenever we're working with a shape, let me pull this up just a little bit. You can notice over here, and again, this is also inside your Properties panel right there, inside the Transform. These are your reference points for the shape that you have selected, and this could be for shapes, images, text boxes, etc. Now, you'll notice that we've got 9 reference points here, and these 9 reference points line up with the reference points on your actual object. So for example, if I were to click on the reference point in the upper left, that's referencing this. The center left right there, bottom left right there, and again, so on. The one in the middle is your center point. You don't see that on your shape, but that exists between these 2 middle points right there. And so basically any manipulation that takes place, whether you're scaling it with the width or height, whether you're choosing its location, whether you're rotating it, all of that will happen from that exact reference point that you have selected. So in this particular case, we just want to make sure that this shape is sitting at the place where it needs to be. And we can use our reference points for that. We're going to make sure our object is selected by using our selection tool, our black selection tool or arrow. And with that, we're going to click on the upper left reference point. This is saying that we want this point to be at a specific spot. And according to our guide, it needs to be, the X needs to be at 0 and Y needs to be at 0.5. And just so you know, whenever we're using this particular function, the X and Y, X is really for moving things left and right. So always consider those little extensions on the X to sort of be directional. And Y is for moving things up and down. So basically what we said that this point exists on the 0-inch mark going left to right. And for the Y, it's at 0.5, so we've come down 0.5 inches. So Y is for up and down, X is for left and right. Okay, so finally what we want to do with this rectangle shape is we want to make sure that it's the right color. And so to do that, let's come over here to our swatches, click on it. And you're going to notice whenever you open up your swatches, you have a fill and a stroke. And depending on which one you want to color, you want to make sure that it's selected. So for right now, the fill is selected because it sits at the front. If I wanted to manipulate the stroke, then I would click on the stroke icon. And this will allow me to apply color to the stroke or the outside of the object. But I want to affect only the fill, so I'm going to click on the fill to make sure it's front and center. And then this particular case, we want it to be 20% black. And we're going to do that inside the tint box. Now do know, and we'll talk about this later, that tint is not the same thing as opacity. Opacity allows you to see through the item. Tint does not. It's just a screened value. So now that we've done that, I'm going to close out my swatches. The last thing we need to do is move this to the back so it sits behind our title. So right-click your shape, come down to Arrange, and choose Send to Back. And there you go. So the next thing we want to do is let's go ahead and add the polygons. So to do that, we're going to come over here to our Shape tool. Again, it's not the Frame tool, it's the Shape tool. And we're going to right-click our Rectangle tool. Gives us the additional items underneath it. And we're going to choose Polygon. And in this case, we're going to hold down the Shift key as we draw to make a perfect polygon. So click and just drag out your shape. Don't worry about trying to get it exact, although you will notice you can see the measurements as you draw it, sort of pop in and out. Don't worry about it. Do the best you can, and then the nice thing is with the Properties panel, you can always come up here and simply type in the exact measurements. But hold down the Shift key to constrain your polygon so it's a perfect polygon, and just draw one out. All right, so once you've got it drawn, let's adjust the width and the height. So again, you can do that inside the Properties panel, but for screen space, I'm going to use the Control panel up here. So I'm going to adjust the width to be 2.25. And I'm going to adjust the height to be 1.9486. Okay. Now let me undo that. I just want to show you one additional feature. Inside your Properties panel and inside your Control panel, you're going to notice this little chain link next to the width and the height. So we talked about constraining, and this will do the exact same thing. So basically, right now it's not linked, which means you can enter these in independent. So for example, whenever we made our width 2.25 and we hit enter, notice how it looks distorted. Let me undo that. So if you want the whatever change that you do to the width to automatically affect the height, then you can basically adjust that by clicking on this chain link, which will constrain those proportions. So whatever you do to one will also proportionally affect the other. So for example, for the width, if we make this 2.25, we also get a height that is 1.9486, which is what it needs to be. And that's because whenever we drew out the shape initially, we did a perfect polygon by holding down the Shift key. All right, so once you have that, go to your Selection tool, the black arrow key, or select V on your keyboard. And let's just go ahead and drag it over here to the left. And let's just fine tune the X and the Y values. So with this selected, we want to click the right center reference point, which will be here. And that's going to basically look at this point. Wherever you see that kind of pointed, almost looks like an arrow happening. So it's right there at the edge. We're going to use that as a reference point. And according to this, we want our X value to be at 1, which it is, or mine is. And we want Y to be at 2.25. So again, X is left and right, and Y is 2.25. So that's going to be up and down. And notice that puts I'm going to deselect here by clicking off to the side. That puts that arrow or that corner point right there on the same line as this. This is a really good technique to use, by the way, when you're using shapes to help draw the eye. It kind of has this imaginative arrow, and so you can use that to help point you to things. All right, but now we need to change the color of this, so select your object, come over to Swatches. Right now it's set to be black, and if we want to change it to white, inside InDesign, that's actually going to be called Paper. So make sure that your fill is selected and then click on Paper. And that's it, just deselect. Okay, so now let's go and draw the other polygon. Let me close out the Swatches panel here. I'm going to select the polygon we just did. And instead of redrawing it, we're just going to copy and paste this one. So I'm going to come up to Edit. I'm going to do Copy, or you can also see the shortcut value over here. And then I'm going to do Edit, Paste. And again, there's a shortcut right there. All right, so it's pasted, and it usually pastes it into the center of your window. Now for this particular one, it's already the dimensions that we need, 2.25, and then the height is correct. All right, well, very good. So basically all we have to do is rotate this. So to rotate it, again, we can manually rotate it by moving our mouse outside the corner over here. So we can free rotate it, by just clicking and dragging, or we can constrain it. If you look at what it says on the guide, it says to rotate 90 degrees. So if we hold down the Shift key, it's going to constrain it to those specific movements, okay, to those 45-degree angles. And this one says minus 90 degrees. I don't know why I did that, but I did. Okay, so you can do it manually. Or if you want to, let's do Control Z. Come over to your Properties panel, and directly underneath the Y value, you're going to notice this sort of angle. That's your rotation angle. And you can type in what you want there, or select it from the drop-down. These are just pretty standard. Again, you're looking at probably 15-degree angle changes. But if you have something less, you can always type it in. So select it or type it, entirely up to you. In this case, we said minus 90, so we'll just do minus 90. Okay, and there you go. Oops, one more thing. You're going to notice how it sort of did that jump action whenever we rotated that. That is because of the reference point that we had selected. Because this was our reference point, whenever we rotated it, it rotated it from that area. And so keep that in mind as you're working with both your placement or your rotation. You may want to check the specific reference point you're choosing to rotate or scale from or move from. So in this particular case, we wanted to technically move it from the center reference point. So let's click on that. And this time, whenever we apply that 90 degrees angle, notice how it stays in place, but it just rotates around the center. So minus 90, hit enter. There you go. And finally, I'm just going to close out the Properties panel. I'm just going to move it over here. I'm going to start moving it where I know it should go. And then basically, let's go to our study guide to see what it needs to be. And according to this, the X value is an obscure number. Hang on, we need our middle reference point. So again, it's looking at the middle point between these, the left and the right. So somewhere right in here. That needs to be, the X value is 5.9141. I didn't intentionally need it to be that. It's just what it is. And our Y value, which is again up and down, needs to be 0.5. And you'll notice that basically what's happening is that this rectangle is cutting through the center of this polygon. And as you guys begin to learn the principle of alignment, you're going to see that that's really what's guiding the placement for a lot of these objects. All right, so our polygons are done, and so now let's move on to our circles. And we'll do that by coming over to our toolbar, coming down to our shape tool, and right-click it, choose the ellipse. And again, if we click and draw just at random, notice how we get this oval, or that looks very distorted. So to create a perfect circle, as you click and drag, hold down the Shift key, and that'll constrain it to a perfect circle. So just go ahead and draw one for right now, and we'll adjust the size here in just a minute. Once you've drawn that first one, let's go over to your arrow tool, your black arrow tool, your selection tool. Click on it, and let's make sure it needs to be the size that it's supposed to be, and this needs to be a width and height of 0.75. So because we made it a perfect shape, we can go ahead and leave this linked so that whatever we type in one will automatically affect the other. And you can see right now it's a perfect circle because they both read at 0.63. So let's highlight the width and just change it to 0.75 and hit enter. And again, because we have that chain link, notice how it affects the height automatically. So this is the right height. So let's go ahead and move it to where it needs to be. Before we start drawing out the other ones, I want to show you a shortcut for that. So with this one still selected, let's move it to its proper place. And let's see. We want to use the middle reference point, which we have selected. And we want to, the Y value, in fact, the Y value is going to be the same for all of these, and you'll see why. Again, Y is up and down. The Y value needs to be 2.2483. Okay, so basically we got it's sitting, the center of this object is sitting on the center of this line or this rectangle. Again, this is part of the principle of alignment. All right, so now let's control the X value, left to right circle, middle center reference point. Let's see, so this one needs to be 4.5. So X value is 4.5. All right, so with this where it needs to be, let's go and create the other 4 circles. Now, instead of doing the edit, copy and edit paste, 4 additional times, I want to show you a different way to duplicate objects inside your Indesign document. And by the way, this also works in both Photoshop and Illustrator as well. So with the object selected, I'm going to hold down the Alt key and notice what happens to my cursor. I now have a double arrow. And whenever you have that double arrow, that indicates that you're going to basically be creating a duplicate. So holding down the Alt key, I can click and begin to drag, and I get another shape when I let go. Now, one other thing, if I want to create a shape that moves on a straight line, I can hold down the Alt key, click and begin to drag, and as I'm dragging, I can also hold down the Shift key, and that will constrain it to a straight line. If I don't have the Shift key selected, notice how I can kind of move it around. But if you're trying to keep it on a perfectly straight line, you notice I'm on that green line there, hold down the Shift key, and that'll constrain its movement. So I can let that go. So now I've got 3 shapes. I just need 2 more. So again, I can hold down Alt, click and drag out the shape, hold down the Shift key to constrain it to a straight line, and do the same thing for the last one. Alt, click and drag while holding down Shift as well. So now I've basically got all 5 circles, and let's make sure that they're all aligned where they need to be. Let's see. This one is not. None of them are. So to fix that, I'm just going to go through, actually to fix that, this is where it needs to be up and down wise. These are slightly off. It looks like they're sitting a little bit below that. So I'm going to show you a neat trick on that one. So because this one is where I want it to be, I just basically need to move these up, it looks like just a little bit. You can select each object by holding down the Shift key and clicking on each one as you go along. Or you can also use your selection tool to draw a marquee that touches each one. Now they're all selected. Come over to your Properties panel. Again, this is an alternative as opposed to going in and touching or having to type in the measurement for each one of these. So with this selected, I'm going to click on the Align Top Edges. And basically what that does is it's going to find the object that sits at the highest, and it's going to make all these other ones align to the top of that one particular object, which was this one over here. So now if we click on our original one, here's the Y value. Let's click on our next one, and notice how the Y value is the same, because these 4 other objects were aligned to the top of this one. So they all have the same Y value. But let's go ahead and change the X value for our farthest right circle. I'm going to show you one more trick here. So with this one, this needs to sit at 8.25. So I'm going to use my X value. Oh, it's already sitting at 8.25. Is it? Yes, so it's already there. Fantastic. So it looks like it's sitting on the margin. But if you need to adjust it inside your X value, make sure you got the center point selected, do 8.25, and that should bring it here right along that margin. So we know for sure that the left circle and the right circle are exactly where they need to be. These obviously are not. You can see we have large amounts of space between them. And what we want to do is we want to make sure that we have an even amount of space in between each circle. So here's another trick for that. Select all your circles. So I'm going to click and draw a marquee that touches each one. Or again, you can hold down the Shift key and just click on each one. Go back to your Properties panel. So below Align, there is this thing called Distribute Objects. And Distribute Objects deals with the space between objects. And so in this particular case, we want all these circles to have the exact same amount of space between them. And so we're going to choose the right over here, since we're dealing with the horizontal centers. If you're doing left to right, this is the one you want to choose. So we're going to click on this. And what it does is it will automatically create the exact same amount of space in between each object. It distributes the space between those horizontal centers. Okay. And what it does in order to distribute is it looks at your outer 2 most objects. In this case, it was looking at our left circle and our right circle. So using those as our reference points, it distributes the space of everything else in between them. And again, if you didn't want to go through that entire process, you can basically just select each one and just give it the X and Y value that we did. However, you will find that that distribution is a most often used function within Indesign. All right, so let's change our colors of our circles. And instead of doing one each individually, I'm going to click and drag a marquee across all of them. So I have them selected. Go to our swatches. For the fill, I'm going to change that to paper and close out my swatches. And notice that because they were all selected, we applied the one fill and it affects all of them. All right, let's go ahead and group them. Come up to your object, go down to group or press Ctrl-G on your keyboard. Now they're grouped. This means it will be treated as one. And you'll also notice that whenever we did that, it affects our X and Y value, as well as our width and our height, because it's now no longer looking at the individual items. It's now looking at the group as a single item. So this is for the entire group. That's the width of the group, that's the height of the group, and the same thing with your X and Y location. All right, so with that done, we're going to copy that, and then we're going to move down to the bottom of the page here, and we're going to paste it. Now with these still selected, I know that these need to be, let's see, gray, that 20% black. So come over to your swatches and begin, and again, because we have all of them selected, whatever color we do, it's going to apply to all of them. So click on black and change the tint to 20%. So now the last thing we need to do is we just need to make sure that we have this moved to the right location. So again, whenever you're looking on your guide, this is going to be treating this as an entire group. So because the group is selected, the X and Y value will be for this entire group. So here we want to make sure that we choose the left center reference point, which is this one. So we're going to click on that, and again, that's looking at this point right here. And we're going to type in our X value, which is minus 0.375. So the minus indicates it's going to sit beyond the edge of the document. And let's hit enter. It's going to move it off to the side there. And then next, we're just going to move it down. So our Y value needs to be 10.375. All right. And if you want to see what's happening here is the center of these points are looking at the center of that line. So technically, if this line were to keep going, it would cut through the center of these. So again, that's that principle of alignment at work. All right, so lastly, we want to create a rectangle shape that's going to sit behind these two paragraphs right here. So to do that, we're going to come over here to our toolbar. If you don't have it selected, just simply right-click your Shapes tool and choose the Rectangle tool. And just click and drag around those two paragraphs. Don't worry about the exact size. We'll fix that here in just a minute. All right, so with it in place, let's go and do something a little bit backwards. Let's take our selection tool, our black selection tool, or V on the keyboard, select it. Let's right-click it and do Arrange, Send to the Back. And let's change the color of that to 20% using our swatches. And again, this is a great technique to use anytime you need to break up space, or if you need to call out specific objects on your screen. So text, if you want text to stand out, again, using a light colored box in the background is a great way to do that. Now with that change sitting in the back and at the right tint, let's go ahead and make sure that we adjust its size and we adjust its location. Now for its size, if previously you have had the width and the height linked, you want to go ahead and make sure that you disable that. So just click on it. This means that if I change one, it's not going to have an impact on the other. Again, that's great if you're working with shapes that are proportional, not so much if you have odd looking shapes like this. All right, inside of our width, we want to make sure that this is set to 3.25. And we want our height to be at 5.6025. 25. Yes, hit enter. All right, and so with our shape the size that we need, let's just make sure that it's in the location we need it to be at. So according to our guide, we want to make sure that we have the lower right reference point selected. So if you don't currently have that, just click on it to do so. And let's go over to our X value, and our X value needs to be 7.625. And our Y value needs to be 9.61. Basically what is happening is we're just centering this black box really behind these two paragraphs. So it looks like it has the same amount of space all the way around. All right, so let's zoom out, Control 0 on the keyboard, or if you want to, come up here to View, Fit Page and Window. And that's what we have. And then let's go ahead and do one more thing. Come up to View, drop down to Screen Mode. Right now we're in Normal, and Normal will show you all the guides that you have and the outlines of your elements. But if that gets kind of annoying, click on Preview, and that's what it looks like. So that's it for shape as an element.